Welcome back to History Class with Dr. W and our continuing study of American cultural history. In recent lectures, we've been talking about popular culture in the Progressive Era, and particularly the crisis of masculinity. In this final lecture in this series, we'll talk a little bit more about culture in this era, some of the new inventions of the age, and the ways in which progressives attempted to harness them for their own uses. Jane Addams and the other progressive reformers hoped to make amusements uplifting and educational. They sponsored free concerts and music instruction, and they attempted to use some of the new technologies of the day for this purpose. In 1877, Thomas Edison invented the phonograph. You could record voices and sounds and replay them. By the 1890s, phonograph parlors were becoming popular. You could play recordings for a nickel apiece. And by the early 20th century, the Victor Talking Machine Company revealed the Victrola, which played sounds and music off of flat discs. They offered opera records at $2 a piece or more, also patriotic music such as the marches of John Philip Sousa. This was upper-class entertainment, and it was marketed as such. The Hull House in Chicago included popular music in some of their entertainment. They would play kids' songs, folk songs, ballads, and classical music. The clarinetist Benny Goodman got his start in the Hull House Boys Band. Jane Addams opposed to vulgar dance music like ragtime, and she sought to use the phonograph to uplift poor children by teaching them about quality music. At the same time, developments in motion pictures were evolving as well. Thomas Edison, in the early 1890s, was developing motion pictures along with other inventors. Though for many years prior there were methods of casting moving shadows or other sorts of images against the wall. Edison developed nickel motion picture machines. His kinetoscope was featured at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. A year later, he opened a kinetoscope parlor in New York City. These typically showed films of about 15 to 20 seconds or maybe 30, and they tended to be fun, depicting topics like Eugene Sandow, the bodybuilder, the circus, Buffalo Bill, and other kinds of entertainment. Already, there were some racier films included in the options, like How Girls Undress. But these films already were geared to a lower-class audience and didn't reach the mainstream. In 1895, Edison's Vitascope was the first motion picture projector. Several other motion picture companies surfaced at around the same time, and Edison sought to stay ahead, had agents filming constantly, and was always on the lookout for entertainment that would lift his company above the others. As he said, it didn't matter much what was filmed, just that it moved. Edison's company, for instance, showed the first movie Kiss to some controversy. By the early 20th century, movie shorts were standard fare, along with vaudeville and other similar places of entertainment. As early as 1897, the Sears Roebuck catalog offered movie projectors. But they were still trying to figure out how to make good and popular films. Sometimes they were hand-colored, some were accompanied by live music or live narrators, and some were tailored to a certain audience. Filmmakers soon discovered that films that told a story were the most popular. Edison's 1903 film, The Great Train Robbery, was the first Western and one of the early popular films. In 1905, the first movie house was opened in Pittsburgh by a man named Harry Davis. Movies were now no longer reliant on other forms of entertainment. Davis soon opened 14 more theaters in Pittsburgh. Then the Pittsburgh idea, as it was called, moved to other cities as well. They were also called Nickelodeons, or 5-cent theaters. By 1910, there were more than 10,000 movie theaters across the country. Movie theaters were mostly working-class entertainment, ideal for immigrants. They were relatively cheap, could be seen any time of day, and frequently featured escapist films. It doesn't matter whether a man is from Kamchatka or Stamboul, whether he can speak English or not. He can understand pictures, and he doesn't need to have anyone explain that to him, said one movie theater manager. Progressive reformers and the upper classes feared that motion pictures were contributing to lower class disorder. One concern was the high percentage of children who were attending the movies, concerns about the audiences that they were mingling with, concerns about the content of some of the films they were watching, and concerned about the darkness in the theater and the kind of misbehavior they might get into. In 1907, Hull House began to feature what they called uplift theater. It was a healthy environment featuring educational films. It also was a failure. The youth weren't interested in that sort of entertainment. As one boy explained, it ain't lively enough. People like to see fights and fellas getting hurt and love making and robbers and all that stuff. This show ain't even funny, unless those big lizards from Java was funny. Reformers struggled to keep up with the technology around them. By the turn of the century, the country was awash in what's been called the aesthetics of astonishment. They were bombarded by visual stimulation. Subways and elevated trains, electric lights, automobiles, department store windows, the penny press, comics, tourism, and traffic. Movies were a part of this new sort of society and reflected it as well. Movies were filled with fast-paced plots and action. Cops and robber chases, fights, and the like were staples of early movies. The crowds who packed the movie houses around the turn of the century were typical of a nation that was moving increasingly towards large spectator events. In our next lectures, we'll talk about one of the most prominent elements of this new spectator culture, the rise of spectator sports.